to be here. I am a small business account manager with TELUS Business Solutions. So I work exclusively with businesses to help them implement different communication solutions for their business. I'm really glad to be able to have joined the chamber and look forward to meeting all of you over the coming events in the coming months. I'm seeing some familiar faces now, so happy to see those people out to these events. Really, I need to know a little bit more about your business. So if you can connect with me, or we have an opportunity to speak, really just interested in learning about your business, what makes it tick, what kind of customers you're looking for, and where I might be able to add help and value. So when it comes to TELUS, I really help businesses in 3 different ways. One is with cell phones and mobility plans. So TELUS has our largest network in Canada with the most coverage, and it's the fastest. So what that means for businesses is that, calls are important for our business, both from a customer and a team perspective. We provide that reliability and affordability. So customers enjoy, the greatest satisfaction rates in Canada as TELUS customers. And I will note, for the near term, we have a special promotion available to Milton business owners. So you can get up to $420 in credits when you switch from another provider to TELUS. Happy to share those details. If you're looking for more details, please reach out to me directly. Another solution we offer for businesses are business phone systems, whether that's for a single entrepreneur or a multi-person team. We have phone systems that aren't just desktop phones with standard features. Now customers, we find, are looking for way more flexibility. They're on the road, they're working from home, they need a phone system that's available where they are. So we have some solutions around that, and comes packaged with features like video conferencing, statistics for calls, where your dropped calls are, how long you're spending on calls. So lots of great options there. I will mention one more solution that TELUS Business Solutions offers, and that's ADT Smart Security Systems. So customers I work with are looking for high quality monitoring and protection systems that they can monitor from their phone remotely. So we have some great systems that include cameras, temperature control modules, everything can be phone. So there's a ton of flexibility there, and it's affordable and definitely reliable. So more importantly, I'm interested in learning about some of your businesses, what you do and what makes you guys tick, and where you guys are, looking for new customers. Happy to connect and share information about my business. So I'd love to talk to anyone. If you're looking to connect, please reach out via email or phone.
All right, Kevin,
I think he's frozen.
And I'd love to talk. So thank you very much.
There we go.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Are you guys seeing me?
Yeah, we can see you. You were just cutting. It was freezing. There was a delay. We did hear the content, but there was a little bit of a delay at some points. But we did get the message. No problem at all. That's super exciting for Milton and for all of those discounts available to us to the end of the month. And definitely, Kevin, if you want to throw that in the comment section too, your contact information, I know it's on the screen, but if you throw it on the comment section as well, and maybe a little synopsis, a summary of the promos, that would be wonderful. And now I'm going to pass it over to our main speaker, Doug Suley from Suley Safety. Doug is a wealth of knowledge. He goes into different businesses and helps out to put into place policies and procedures and making sure that the workplace is safe in all aspects. And especially right now with the pandemic, he has been a vital resource for us. And I am excited to hear what you have to say about openings and making sure that our businesses don't get fined or closed down again. We've had enough, Doug. We want to be safe and we want to stay open. So, Doug, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Good morning, everyone. I really appreciate you guys taking an opportunity to join us for this webinar. My name is Doug Suley. I run a small health and safety consulting firm based out of Mississauga called Suley Safety Services. We work with a lot of small to medium-sized businesses to help them achieve compliance with the health and safety laws that, as we all know, especially with whether it's COVID or even general health and safety, the laws are ever changing. So it's a lot to keep up with on your own. And I'm hoping that today I can provide some basic information to kind of help you develop your health and safety programs in your workplace. As I did mention in the chat as well, and earlier in the presentation, I will actually touch on COVID briefly, specifically more with regards to the safety plans that are required right now. This is kind of the big heavy hitter that the ministry and Halted Public Health are looking for. So we'll get started here. So today we're going to talk about the Health and Safety Act. We're going to talk about workplace responsibilities, and we'll talk about the Ministry of Labor. And finally, we'll talk about what employers need to do. So as I said, after today, I hope that it provides you some basic information to kind of take back to your workplace and start to develop your own health and safety programs. So we'll start with the Act. The Health and Safety Act is a set of laws that details the duties and responsibilities of employers, supervisors, and workers. The whole point of the Health and Safety Act is to ensure workers return home at the end of each day safely. The Act puts the onus on the employer to protect the workers. This is what's called the due diligence clause. This is one of the main clauses that you'll find any sort of orders or even potential fines or significant issues that a workplace can run into. I will get into that in a bit more detail as we get into responsibilities, but everybody in the workplace is required to work within and follow the law and applicable regulations. So in addition to the Health and Safety Act, which does apply to about 90% of the workplaces in Ontario, you also have regulations that are specific to workplaces. Some of the ones that we'll talk about that you may see include WHMIS, industrial establishments, construction projects, critical injuries and the definition, farming operations, the general occupational health and safety awareness and training regulation that mandates the worker 4-step and supervisor 5-step training, as well as working at heights training for anybody who is in the construction industry. And finally, Regulation 1101, which is your first aid requirements. So regulations contain more detailed requirements to make the workplace safe, and they do concentrate on specific industry or situations. But with regards to workplace responsibility, the Act, as I mentioned, sets out roles and responsibilities for all workplace parties. The internal responsibility system is the fundamental idea behind the Health and Safety Act. What this states is that everybody in the workplace, whether you're an employer, a supervisor, a worker, health and safety committee, health and safety reps, contractors, they must all work together to keep the workplace safe. The other main point of it is that the workplace is required to solve health and safety problems together. The Ministry of Labor does not want to come in to solve workplace problems unless the workplace is not able to solve them. So with regards to responsibilities, there is a hierarchy on how much responsibility and authority someone has in the workplace in regards to how much responsibility they have. So as the employer sets and plans and controls the work that is being done. And they have the most authority over the workplace. So as a result, they have the most responsibility. The employer must make sure that they review at least annually the workplace health and safety policy. They must provide specific information and instructions on how to stay safe on the job. They must ensure that measures and procedures identified are carried out in the workplace, ensure the equipment, materials, and protective devices are provided and maintained in good condition, as well as make sure that they're used properly. They must conduct regular risk and hazard assessments, establish control measures for those hazards, and establish, deliver training and education to all of the employees. They must also make sure that they integrate safe behavior into the day-to-day operation of the business. They must review all reports of accidents and hazards in a prompt, objective, and sensitive manner, take appropriate and corrective action, and provide appropriate response measures, facilitate medical attention and appropriate support, and make sure that any critical injury is reported immediately to the Ministry of Labor, as well as their internal health and safety rep or joint health and safety committee within 48 hours after the occurrence. So an employer, as I said, to go back to due diligence, the employer is required to do everything reasonable to protect the health and safety of the worker. If there is ever a fine or if there is ever charges that are laid, the only defense that an employer is going to have is that they have proven that they have done everything reasonable to protect the health and safety of a worker. This can be a bit vague in certain situations. However, I think the easiest way to look at it is if you can do it and it can protect the workers, then you need to do it. We also have supervisors and managers. Supervisors also have significant responsibility in the workplace. The Health and Safety Act's definition of a supervisor is a person who has charge of a workplace or authority over a worker. In some cases, the employer and the supervisor are the same person. Responsibilities for supervisors and managers include enforcing the policy and procedures and monitoring compliance, ensuring all employees work in a safe manner, ensure employees use protective devices, follow the measures and procedures required, identifying and alerting staff to hazards in the workplace they are aware of, investigating all workplace accidents, and facilitating medical attention for employees as it is required. They must also immediately report critical injuries to a Ministry of Labor inspector, immediately report critical injuries to the health and safety rep, the Joint Health and Safety Committee, and their senior management. They must send accident reports within 48 hours after the occurrence to a Ministry of Labor director where there is a critical injury or fatality. They must report all lost time, healthcare, and modified pay accidents to the employer as well as WSIB, and provide non-critical injury accident reports to the Health and Safety Rep and Joint Health and Safety Committee within 4 days. So with regards to due diligence, the supervisor also has significant responsibility. The supervisor must also do everything reasonable to protect the health and safety of a worker. This is very important as a supervisor can be fined and a supervisor can also be charged under the criminal code, similar to what the employer can be charged. Employees are required to participate in education and training programs. Employees must also understand and comply with the workplace health and safety policies and procedures, report all accidents, injuries, and workplace hazards to their supervisor immediately. They must inform the health and safety rep or joint health and safety committee about any health and safety concerns in the workplace, contribute to risk and hazard assessments, seek appropriate medical attention, report any absence of or defect in any equipment or protective device to the employer or supervisor, and they must use or wear the equipment, protective devices, or clothing that the employer requires. So not only do they have to wear the PPE that the law requires, but if the employer asks them to wear PPE in addition to the law, then the employee is required to wear that PPE, and the employer has a right to reprimand that employee if they do not wear it. Workplaces also have health and safety reps and joint health and safety committees, depending on the size of the workplace. These committees and health and safety reps are valuable resources to help with regards to health and safety and solving health and safety concerns in the workplace. So if a workplace has between 1 or 5 employees, there is no rep or committee required. If a workplace has 6 or more employees, they are required to have a health and safety rep that represents the workers. The health and safety rep does not have to be trained and certified. However, they do need to know about their responsibilities and how to perform them. If there is a designated substance in a workplace, then a joint health and safety committee would be required regardless of the number of employees. If you have between 20 and 49 employees, you are required to form a joint health and safety committee. This committee must have a minimum of 2 members, and 2 members must be certified. 1 member that represents the workers and 1 member that represents the management. When you have 50 or more employees, you must also have a committee, but the minimum requirement is 4 members. And you need to keep in mind that a health and safety committee is required to have the majority of their members being workers. The whole point is to make sure that workers are represented on health and safety matters. So my suggestion would be, if you have 4 members, you need to have at least 2 members that are workers and maybe only 1 or 2 that are management. The management is there to be able to provide approvals on costs, as well as things that get sent up the chain towards management to make a decision on. And again, in this case, 2 of those members need to be certified, 1 that represents the workers and 1 that represents management. Your worker rep needs to not have any supervisory responsibilities. They need to be able to be classified as a worker. Some of the responsibilities a health and safety rep has includes investigating all critical injuries related to workplace accidents, receiving a report of critical injuries within 48 hours, receiving written notice within 4 days for any non-critical injury, investigating work refusals, and accompanying a Ministry of Labor inspector during investigations. They must also identify workplace hazards and carry out regular monthly inspections of the workplace. They must make recommendations to the employer and be available to receive worker concerns, complaints, and recommendations, as well as available to discuss problems and recommend solutions. They must be available to provide input into existing and proposed health and safety programs, and be consulted about workplace testing and receive the results of any report related to health and safety, as well as testing in the workplace. Your joint health and safety committees have very similar responsibilities. However, there are a few additional ones because of the fact they are a committee. The joint health and safety committee is required to identify workplace hazards and be consulted about workplace testing. They must make recommendations to the employer and investigate work refusals and serious accidents. They must carry out monthly inspections of the workplace, be available to receive worker concerns, complaints, and recommendations, but they must also meet at a regular frequency to discuss health and safety requirements. The minimum amount of time that they must meet is every 3 months. However, depending on the workplace and situation, they may need to meet far more frequently than that. They must also be available to discuss problems and recommend solutions, and be available to provide input into existing and proposed health and safety programs. They must also be available to accompany a Ministry of Labor inspector during investigations, and be informed of any workplace accidents involving injury, death, or occupational illness, and finally receive the results of any reports that relate to health and safety in the workplace. This could be testing that is done, this could be an assessment that's done. They must receive a copy of this. So before we move on to the Ministry of Labor, one of the things I also wanted to talk about is the work refusal investigations and the right to stop work. So a joint health and safety committee member has a right to stop the work if they feel that it is unsafe. These are in far more detail within the Health and Safety Act, and your certified members will have this knowledge based on the training that they have completed. Always make sure that you use your joint health and safety committee or your health and safety rep as a resource. They're there to help. They're not there just to cause a hindrance. So let's get into the Ministry of Labor. So I'm going to talk about inspectors. The role of the Ministry inspectors is to enforce the sections and clauses of the Act and regulations. The inspectors will issue orders for non-compliance. They'll stop work performed if it is unsafe, and they are able to seize documents and items from the workplace and then return them after they have made copies. When they do this, they do provide you with written notification that they will be doing this. Section 54 of the Health and Safety Act details the inspector's powers. So we're going to go over those in a bit of a brief detail here. So the power of an inspector is that they can enter any workplace at any time without any warrant or notice. It's very rare that they'll actually let you know that they're going to show up. They're just going to show up. The whole point is to attempt to catch anything that might not be compliant with health and safety requirements. They can request the use of any machine, device, article, thing, material, or biological, chemical, or physical agent or part thereof. They can require drawings, specs, licenses, documents, records, and reports to inspect, examine, and copy. They can remove any of the above with written notification to make copies and return to the workplace. They can conduct or take tests and collect samples of any equipment, machine, device, article, thing, material, or biological, chemical, or physical agent. And they can require training materials to inspect, examine, and copy those materials, or if they choose, they can actually attend any such training program as it's being run for your workers. They can require in writing an employer to conduct any tests and reports by a professional at the employer's expense. They can request any person, professional to accompany or assist them with an inspection, test, or inquiry as they see fit. They can speak with any worker or person in the workplace that they deem relevant to the inspection, inquiry, or test as they see fit. They can require a workplace or part thereof not to be disturbed for a reasonable period of time to carry out an examination, investigation, or test. They can also require any equipment, machine, device, article, or thing, or process to be operated or set in motion, or a system or procedure to be carried out that is relevant to their examination, inquiry, or test. They can require an owner, constructor, or employer to provide a report bearing the seal and signature of a professional engineer, stating the load limits of the building structure or any part thereof, or any other part of the workplace, whether it's temporary or permanent. A building structure or any part thereof, or any other part of the workplace, whether temporary or permanent, is capable of supporting or withstanding the loads being applied to it or likely applied. And finally, a building, structure, or any part thereof, or any other part of the workplace, whether temporary or permanent, is capable of supporting any loads that may be applied to it. They can also require in writing to produce records or information or provide a report or evaluation made by a professional or any process or biological, chemical, or physical agent present, used, or intended for use for the workplace, and the manner of use at the expense of the person. This will include information such as the ingredients and common names, composition and properties, toxicological effects, the effect of exposure thereto, whether by contact, inhalation, or ingestion, protective measures used or to be used in respect thereof, emergency measures used or to be used to deal with the exposure, and the effect of the use, transport, and disposal of that chemical, biological, or physical agent. So quite a bit of information so far. There is more information and more detail in the law and regulations. So let's talk a little bit more about what employers need to do. So first things first, your health and safety policy. The Occupational Health and Safety Act places many duties on employers. One of the duties is to have a written health and safety policy and program. Section 25, subsection 2, clause J of the Act requires employers with more than 5 employees to prepare a policy, prepare procedures, review the program, and sign the policy at least once a year, and set up a program to implement that policy. The health and safety policy should be a straightforward statement of senior management's commitment to workplace health and safety. It should be broad enough to cover all aspects of the company's activities. It doesn't need to be 10, 20, 50 pages. I will actually say with regards to a health and safety policy, the Ministry of Labor does have a template that you can use that you can find on their website. I would strongly suggest that you use this as your absolute bare minimum. So in addition to your health and safety policy, you also need to develop policies and forms that support the requirements of your health and safety policy. So you need to consider when setting up your health and safety program, roles and responsibilities, training requirements for the workplace, inspection requirements, incidents, personal protective equipment, and finally, continuous improvement and regular monitoring. There are a few other HR-related policies you need to consider, including violence and harassment, return to work, and progressive discipline. The employer is ultimately responsible for identifying and controlling hazards in the workplace. The supervisors, as well as workers, have a role in this as well. Your joint health and safety committee and health and safety reps will identify hazards and recommend corrective actions to follow up to ensure that these hazards and corrections have been implemented. So an employer needs to make sure that they have completed what's called a hazard assessment. The hazard assessment recognizes and assesses hazards to help develop control measures and evaluate in order to control or eliminate any hazard or risk in the workplace. There's a few different ways that you do this. You can use inspections of the workplace and previous inspection reports, looking for any hazards that may pop up. Observing worker behavior, reviewing reports that have been developed. And you can also use what's called the RACE method. So the RACE method stands for recognize, assess, control, and evaluate. Basically, this takes you a step-by-step process from recognizing the hazard, assessing the hazard based on severity. So that will be your frequency and probability and likelihood of severity of injury, and developing control measures based on what you assess the hazard to be. So a hazard such as a worker working on a roof with no guardrail would be classified and assessed as a very high risk hazard, and he's very likely to get injured. So setting up control measures in that instance, such as ensuring a guardrail is set up, ensuring the worker is trained on how to work at heights, ensuring fall protection and PPE is worn. These are all basic methods that you can use to help assess and control a hazard such as a worker working on a roof or building with no guardrail. Hazards will fall into 5 main categories. It also basically stands as PMEP, but it'd be people, equipment, materials, environment, and your process. So the people hazards are the hazards that are the most difficult to control, because regardless of what some people may say out there, we cannot control people. Doesn't matter, you can train them, you can provide them with information, you can show them how to do it properly, and attitudes and mindsets and situations may prevent that from actually being done safely. Equipment hazards deal mostly with the equipment that's being used. Your material hazards have to do with the materials. Your environment can be your internal work environment as well as the surrounding environment.
All right, no, of course.
And finally, your process hazard has to do with the workflow and tasks. So once you've recognized and assessed the hazard, you need to develop control measures. So the employer and supervisor must assess the hazards and implement controls to correct the hazards. Controls can be done at one of 3 locations: at the source, along the path, or at the worker. At the source is usually through eliminating or substituting. Along the path will be more engineering controls such as ventilation. And at the worker is strictly your PPE. When you develop control measures, PPE is not your first control measure, and it's also not your only control measure. Your PPE is basically your last resort. So as you can see, the hierarchy there of hazard controls is to obviously eliminate the hazard. That is the best solution. If you can't eliminate it, you try to substitute it. So this could be a chemical that is substituted with a less harmful chemical. If you can't do that, you will try engineering controls such as ventilation, barriers, Administrative controls have to do with reducing the exposure to the worker. So this could be setting up specific schedules. And finally, your PPE is your last line of defense, and this is the use of PPE to help minimize the impact on the worker. A proper control measure for any hazard really incorporates as many of these as you can. And obviously you want to go from the top to the bottom whenever possible. When you complete your hazard assessment, you basically have the details needed to write your safe operating procedures. So your safe operating procedures are one of the most important aspects of a health and safety program. This provides the procedure that a worker uses in order to perform the work safely. You must include and identify the hazards and controls for different tasks and work processes. Some of the safe procedures that you need to consider include slip, trips, and falls, ergonomic hazards, which could be lifting, carrying, it could be order picking, machines and equipment. So this could be your forklifts, this could be boom trucks, this could be scissor lifts, or any type of equipment that you're using in your workplace. You have to look at the tasks that are performed too, and make sure that you have proper procedures for these. Your environmental hazards, so you want to develop procedures on how to handle noise, lighting, radiation, vibration, general hot and cold environments as well. And finally, you also need to develop emergency procedures. So you want to have emergency procedures in your safe operating procedures, but you also want to have your general emergency procedures as well that cover all common and not so common events that can occur. So some of your non-common could be things like earthquakes, severe storms, whereas your common emergencies are going to be fire, bomb threat, maybe physical violence or physical threats, so on and so forth. So once you've developed your procedures and you've developed your health and safety program, you want to make sure that you train your workers. So there are some minimum training requirements. All workers and supervisors must complete worker and supervisor health and safety awareness. This is offered through the Ministry of Labor, as I mentioned before, and it is a 4-step program for workers and a 5-step for supervisors. You can either print off the booklet that they provide on their website, or you can do the online module and you're provided a certificate of completion once done. For violence and harassment, you need to make sure that all workers and supervisors are trained on their duties and responsibilities and how to report incidents for violence and harassment. WMIS can always end up being a question depending on the workplace. My recommendation has always been that you complete WMIS with all of your workers. WMIS needs to be done if any worker can come into contact with any type of chemical or hazardous material in the workplace. If you don't complete it and an inspector comes in, you're gonna have to try and explain why it is that they don't do WMIS. My suggestion is just make sure that you do it. It certainly makes life a lot simpler if you can just hand over the certificates if you need to. First aid and CPR. This is required for all workplaces of any size. Regulation 1101 provides more insight into how many certified attendants there need to be, additional materials that are required based on the size of your workplace as well. And your health and safety rep and joint health and safety training. So your certified members of your joint health and safety committee must complete the certification training based on approval from a provider that is approved by the Ministry of Labor. Your non-certified members and your health and safety rep need to complete training on their duties and responsibilities. This does not have to be through a certified provider. This can be through something that you complete internally, or you can bring in a trainer who does training for this type of task as well. And finally, not only do you have to train your staff on this, but you also need to train your staff on the hazards they're going to face and how to work safely. So this can be a variety of different types. This could be the use of masks. This could be fall protection and working at heights. This could be training on machines, whether it is production machines or even machines such as lift trucks and scissor lifts and booms, elevating work platforms, etc. Anything that is a hazard in the workplace, you need to make sure you train your workers. So as to my last point there, company information, hazards and concerns, and hazard assessments and regulations applicable to the workplace may require additional training. You need to make sure that you investigate all accidents and near misses in the workplace, and you need to make sure you have documentation that shows that you've done this. You need to report lost time, healthcare, or modified work accidents to the WSIB within 3 days of finding out about the accident. And any copies of non-critical accident information must be provided to the Health and Safety Rep and Joint Health and Safety Committee. You must make sure that your workplace is inspected on a monthly basis. Your supervisors have a responsibility to conduct regular inspections, but your Health and Safety Rep and Joint Health and Safety Committee also have mandatory legal requirements to conduct inspections of the workplace. You do need to also look at some of the equipment you're using, and in some cases, regulations require that an inspection is done every day, or in the case of forklifts, it's done prior to every shift. You must document your hazards found, and ensuring you have a standardized form or process to be able to document this is extremely important. And you need to follow up to ensure that any hazards or issues found are corrected. So we've kind of gone over some of the basics. I do want to touch on COVID because right now it is at top of mind for everyone. It is at top of mind for workplaces. The Ministry of Labor is currently requiring all workplaces to have a COVID-19 safety plan in place. What this is so the workplace must develop measures to combat COVID-19 specific to their workplace. If there is a failure and it's found to comply, it may result in fines between $750 to up to $500,000 and up to a year in jail. And if issues are not fixed, you can be fined up to $5,000 per day that the issue has not been corrected. The important thing is to make sure you use the safety plan to develop specific procedures. So you need to develop specific procedures for screening. So this is screening your workers. This can be passive screening, such as asking them to self-screen before they come in, but also actively screening them when they come into the workplace. You do, in many cases, you need to ensure that you also screen your clients when they come into certain establishments as well. You need to have procedures in regards to masks and face coverings, as well as PPE that it needs to be worn. This can also include face shields. You need to make sure that you also talk to your workers about how to wear the mask properly. This is one of the biggest things that I see when I go into workplaces as well. Most workplaces, they are compliant in regards to masks, but they're not compliant in the sense of workers wearing them under their nose. I saw one worker actually wearing it over their eyes and nose so that they could breathe through their mouth. I don't know what the point of that was, but clearly it's not being worn properly. Cleaning, so making sure you have measures for cleaning and sanitizing of the workplace, including providing sanitizer to workers. Signage, so signage has been a big issue. There are no specific requirements as to how much signs you need to have in the workplace. However, you need to make sure, my rule of thumb is you need to make sure you have at least 1 or 2 per room that you have in the workplace. That's kind of my rule of thumb. It gives you a good chance to be able to make sure that you have enough signage. If you have a larger warehouse space, then you want to make sure there's more signs than that. Signage includes physical distancing, washing your hands, your signage on your front doors and all entrances about screening, and also the requirement to wear masks whenever you come into any establishment. Physical distancing measures. So this can be a variety of different things. This could be setting up work from home, setting up workstations to allow physical distancing or the installation of plexiglass if it's not possible. Setting up worker stations so that they are physically distanced if this is feasible. But you also need to look at things such as curbside pickup, making sure that there's measures and procedures in place to ensure that curbside pickups reduce the risk. Having a curbside pickup where your employee goes out and meets the client and they stand right beside each other and chat is not going to be good enough in regards to protecting your workers or the general public. Making sure that that curbside pickup and delivery is set up so that there is very minimal to no exposure to the workers as well as your clients. You also need to develop measures for isolation and in the event that there is a case. For this, I usually will advise most clients to review the public health guidelines and develop your procedures based on that. And finally, your training. It's one thing to develop a COVID safety plan, but you need to make sure that you train your workers. One of the things that I mentioned with the Ministry of Labor is they can come in and speak with any worker in your workplace. And if they ask to speak with that worker, you can't tell them that they can't. And they will ask questions such as, have you been trained on what to do in this event of this? Have you been told that you have to wear a mask? Have you been told how to wear the mask properly? So making sure that your workers are trained on the contents of the document is extremely important. And finally, one of the last things you need to consider and put into place is, like I said, putting a program together and having it sit on a shelf is just, it's not good enough. You need to make sure that you implement it, and you need to make sure that you evaluate the effectiveness of it. So the law does require that all health and safety programs be reviewed annually and updated as required. Policies must be signed annually and posted on the Health and Safety Board. You must make sure that you monitor progress with program compliance and make sure that you review and monitor your program regularly. The absolute minimum is every year. But if there's a change in your business or there's a change in task, then you need to deal with those changes and make sure that you've covered any additional or new hazards that may have arisen. If you are facing the Ministry of Labor and they have come into your workplace and they have issued any orders for non-compliance or stop work or issued any fines, you need to correct the substandard acts that have been found. So if the ministry tells you that you do something, you need to correct it. You need to make sure that you comply with the inspector's orders, including sending your documents back to show that it's been done. Some people will correct it and send an email or call them and say that, you know, it's been done, and maybe that's okay. You need to send the notice of non-compliance back, signed, stating that it is completed. This is very important in part of your documentation. Never start work where a stop work order has been issued unless the Ministry of Labor inspector has removed the stop work order. And make sure that you notify your health and safety rep and joint health and safety committee of any orders that have been issued. They are a valuable resource to the workplace. They're not there to make your life difficult. They are there to actually help you. They have training that can actually help address some of these hazards. And when a ministry inspector comes on site, they are going to ask for them. You may try and jump in and try and, you know, take the lead on it, but they're just going to look for your health and safety rep or joint health and safety committee if they feel that there is one in the workplace. So some of the places you can get help, the Ministry of Labor and health and safety associations do have a significant amount of templates and guidelines that you can use. My strongest suggestion, if you're going to go this route, is you need to make sure that you update it to your workplace. If you just take their guideline or their policy and slap your business logo on it and post it, it's not good enough. The guidelines are there just as a template, you need to make the necessary changes in order to make it specific to your workplace. Your health and safety reps and joint health and safety committees will have valuable training and are a valuable resource, as I said, that you can use towards any questions or concerns that you may have about health and safety. And also you could reach out to a health and safety consultant, such as myself. I work with a lot of different clients in different sizes and industries, and I'm there as the resource, and I help educate. And I will work with you to ensure that you can reach the compliance level that you would like to reach. So just to finish off, I'd just like to provide some contact information quickly. You can reach me by phone, email, or even through my website. And I think it'd be a great idea to follow me on social media as well, as I do provide tips and tricks, different compliance information. And a lot of it I do get pretty breaking news style. So I do try to post it as quickly as possible so that it's there. And with that, I do want to thank you all for sitting through the presentation. I do hope that you guys have learned something from this. I will be happy, as mentioned, to provide copies of the slides to anybody who requests it. And I will be able to send those over within a day or so of the presentation here. So.